Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, April 1st, 2019. This is a Moscow City Council meeting, and it is April Fool's, but we are certainly going to have a meeting. I'm not going to adjourn it after we got you all here this evening. So with that, I'll turn over to Art.
Yeah, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, that invisible column.
Thank you, Art. With that, I'm going to go right into a proclamation that I have this evening on fair housing. And here's how this proclamation reads. Whereas April 2019 marks the 51st anniversary of the passage of Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, commonly known as the Federal Fair Housing Act. And whereas discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, gender, or national origin in the sale, rental, leasing, or financing of housing or land to be used for construction of housing or in the provision of brokerage services is prohibited by Title VIII of 1968 Civil Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988 expands coverage to include disabled persons and families with children. And whereas the Idaho Human Rights Commission Act has prohibited discrimination in housing since 1969, and whereas the city has determined that discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender, identity, or expression shall be prohibited pursuant to the Moscow City Code Title 10, Chapter 19, in order to ensure that all persons are afforded equal opportunities in housing. And whereas equal opportunity for all, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, disability, family status, national origin, or sexual orientation, or gender, identity, or expression is a fundamental goal of our city. And whereas equal access to housing is an important component of this goal as fundamental as the right to equal education and employment. And where housing is a critical component of family and community health and stability, and whereas housing choice impacts our children's access to education, our ability to seek and retain employment options, the cultural benefits that we enjoy, the extent of our exposure to crime and drugs, and the quality of health care we receive in emergencies. And whereas the laws of this nation and our state seek to ensure such equality of choice for all transactions involving housing. And whereas ongoing education, outreach, and motivating are key to raising awareness of fair housing principles, practices, rights, and responsibilities, and whereas the mission of the city's Fair and Affordable Housing Commission includes researching, analyzing, recommending to the mayor and the city and the council ways in which the city may further fair housing practices. And whereas among the duties of Fair and Affordable Housing Commission are to review the city code analysis, the impediments to fair housing and action plan each year, and to recommend changes as it may deem necessary. And whereas only through continued cooperation, commitment, and support of all Idahonians can barriers to fair housing be removed. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, the mayor of the city of Moscow, do hereby proclaim April 2019 to be Fair Housing Month, and in the city of Moscow, and I urge all citizens to support the programs and policies and prevent or eliminate discriminatory housing practices. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have Randy Bokel here with us this evening to receive this. And Randy is the chair of our Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. So we'll get a picture of you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Mayor.
And it's kind of nice that we got sun coming through the window for once. You know, it's kind of nice that we started a meeting off of sunlight and not dark and gloomy. Anyway, here we go, Randy. Should we do one more?
Never hurts to use that, huh?
Okay.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor.
Absolutely. And just hang on a second because we're going to be up next.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have a presentation to Steve Bonner, and Randy Bokel, who is the chair of our Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, is going to do the presentation. So,
If you would join me here, Mayor, Steve Bonner, and Casey, if you would come over also.
let's get over here so we're looking right into that. Look into that sound, give us devil eyes. We need to do.
Well, Steve, every now and then we get the extreme pleasure to really recognize an individual for all of the extra efforts that they put into life and making the lives of people around them better. You've got your job description with sojourners, but that just doesn't seem to be enough. You step well outside the bounds of your job description and engage and help so many people throughout this community. That on behalf of the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission in the city of Moscow, we just want to recognize you and your efforts that you have put forth in making this town a better. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Steve, over here at the podium, I'll let you speak and tell us what's on your mind, my friend.
Good afternoon, evening, City Council, Mayor, City staff. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. One of the things I do want to also voice my appreciation is the funding that you allocated to us last year for cameras in our buildings have been immense help for our safety and security of the on-site program we have. I do have some wonderful news to announce. The journey of the last 3 years has been pretty rough, I'd have to say. And I've trusted that answers come in funny ways. And Tuesday night last week, I'm processing how do I shut down the transitional housing when there's a need? Does it destroy our program integrity, et cetera? And I came up with an idea of how we can keep it going. And I ran it by my board and several others, Justice Stegner now, and Judge. We are going to charge folks who live in our program, we're going to charge them rent. That way I'm going to generate revenues to keep the program going and allow our services to continue on unimpeded as we previously had. So I was real excited about that kind of awareness so that we can keep it going. And let you know, too, we are the main player in this region. If we were to go by the wayside, the void in what we deal with would be tremendous. To give you an idea, we do about 13 to 15,000 bed nights alone between two of my programs. And in January and February, we expended $20,000 in homeless prevention funds, power shutoff, eviction notices, water shutoffs. $5,000 in motel vouchers for those that were homeless, and we have the access point where we screened over 750 calls seeking services in 1 year. We also have a housing specialist. And we do this on bare bones budget, of course, but I believe that what we are providing not only to Moscow and Latah County is a needed resource that is dire. And as things are going and the projections from HUD, the housing availability will definitely decrease with Section 8. Right now the wait list is about 8 months. The HUD cuts that are going to be coming is projected that the wait list for that will extend beyond 2 years, which then creates its own problems. So just kind of a forewarning is that these issues aren't going away. We're seeing more normal people, so to speak, that have never accessed any kind of help or services seeking help and guidance. And it has been a rough 3 years. We're the only self-funded transitional program left in Idaho. As the funding was cut 3 years ago, we've been able to maintain it. Without the support of the city and the county and private citizens, we would not have made it this far. And then, of course, my assault that occurred, had I been 2 years in the trenches, let's say, I probably would have walked away from it. But luckily, having been through this, on this path for 30-plus years, the assault and the ensuing long-term problems I have as a result of it just strengthened my desire to keep on serving those that have no voice for themselves. And then, of course, we had the fire. Just add a little bit more salt to it. It's like, whatever God is, like, why us? And the answer is, why not? And with it, it has made us stronger. I have an incredible staff, and we would not be in the position we are today without all the support that we've received. So thank you very much, and thank you for this acknowledgement. I really appreciate it. So.
Well, now, don't run off, Steve, because I want to brag a little bit about you. You've been doing this for decades, for years and years and years, and I don't know of anybody that would do any better of a job than you have. It's amazing. And I say that sincerely. because you're a unique person, and you've made a lot of things happen out there, and quite honestly, I don't know how in God's green earth you make it happen, but you do, and so hats off to you. You're very well deserving of that award.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lambert. I appreciate it.
welcome.
And thank you everything for you, what you all do too.
Okay, well, with that, we'll move on, ladies and gentlemen, to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Ann to approve the consent agenda as is. I'll start to roll with Catherine.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary, do you have anything for us this evening?
Thank you, Your Honor. The only thing I would like to do is acknowledge Officer Joe Knickerbocker, who had his retirement celebration last Friday. 21 years, started his career as a dispatcher in 1998, promoted up to communications supervisor, and then when our dispatch, we contracted with Whitcomb, Joe was already a reserve in the police department, joined the police department and has been serving since 2004. So sorry to see him go, but happy to acknowledge his service.
That was a really nice retirement thing for Officer Knickerbocker, and I got to share with you one of the comments I made. And he was one of those, every single time we have an officer retire, they have had some hand in trying to remodel the police department over the decades. And every single one of them have got a piece of it, including our own chief over the years. And it's just amazing to me, the dedication that these officers over the years have done for this city. It's just amazing. It's wonderful. Anyway, thank you, Gary. With that, I will move on to mayor's appointments, and I have one this evening. Carrie Mozak on the Farmers Market Commission, expiration 12/31 of 2021. I'd certainly entertain a motion from the council to approve this.
I move approval of the nomination.
Second.
Okay, well, Art beat you to the punch, Jim. Got a motion by Art and a second by Gina to approve Carrie Morsak for the Family Market Commission, or Farmers Market Commission, expiration 12/31/2021. I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Carrie, you here with us this evening? No? Okay. One of the things I always like to do is whenever somebody gets appointed to a commission, a new commission member, I always love to give them an opportunity to speak. Because I'm so proud of the folks in our community that work hard on various commissions. It's a big deal for me as the mayor to see that happen, and I appreciate all the hours of volunteerism that those around us have. So, thank you. I'll be catching up with Carrie in the future. With that, we will go on to item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period. And we have a period of time that we allow for the public to speak to us about various issues, as long as there's something that is not on this evening's agenda and or in front of the Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. Come up, state your name, and we will give you 3 minutes to tell us what's on your mind.
I just want to move the keyboard really quickly.
You need the keyboard?
No. Okay,
need
that's
to
okay. I
move
was trying to
back
reach
in.
the
All
mic.
moved in. It was a.
Just don't want to bump any.
Well, we have some little booby traps once in a while, so we.
Thank you for
It's
that.
not intended to slow you down. That's.
My name is Kim O'Neill, and I live at 2100 Lexington Avenue here in Moscow. Mayor, city council, city staff, members of the community, I'm here tonight representing the Moscow Career and Technical Education Coalition. This is a new group that has just been formed of parents and professionals who have initiated a discussion to gauge community support and determine if there is a need for expanded career and technical education in the Moscow School District. Specifically, this initiative would focus on agricultural science and technology in the Moscow School District. So we've come together to plan and work with the school district to assess whether or not the community has an interest in moving this effort forward. And so the first effort of a grassroots initiative is to assess the community support. So we've, as a coalition, have gathered a meeting on April 10th at the Best Western Inn at 6 p.m. to gauge this interest. At this meeting, we'll provide additional context of the history of career and technical education in the Moscow School District, share some ideas about short-term and long-term planning, and ask for additional commitment to move this effort forward. This coalition has already spoken with the superintendent of school districts, the principal of Moscow High School, the career and technical education director at Moscow High School, and engaged with the agricultural education and extension department at the University of Idaho, who has agreed to put forth efforts in resources, time, and training to move effort forward as soon as next academic year. So today, I'd like to leave some cards here with a QR code that leads to a parent survey. It's a survey that will be given to all adults in the community to assess this interest, and we'll follow up with social media efforts promoting our informational session on April 10th, followed by a survey that will be distributed to all of the students in high school and the middle school to see if there is truly an interest in enhanced career and technical education. With that, I stand for questions.
Well, that's an amazing amount of stuff you said in just a short period of time.
Did I make 3 minutes?
You used well use of your time. Well, I think it's pretty exciting to hear, so I'm curious to see where this is going to take us. Any comments for Catherine?
Yeah, thank you for presenting. I have a question about, with a lot of surveys that we do at the city level, the questions for the survey go through quite a dissemination to make sure that the information that we collect is clear and manageable in terms of action. So I was curious at how you were creating your survey.
So we're really fortunate to engage with professors in the agricultural extension and education department at the university. So they're trained professors who conduct research all the time, and they were really the ones who put this survey together. So it's short, it's concise, and all of the items do have actionable follow-ups that we can take forward.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Can we have a card?
I'd love to distribute those. Here, I'll just pass them down.
Have you spoken with the principal at the alternative high school?
We have not engaged there, but that's a terrific idea. Absolutely terrific.
He's part of the Moscow School District. He's also retiring, Bill Marino, but I'm sure that Mr. Bailey spoke on his behalf.
Yes, Dr. Bailey has been very supportive, engaged, and I think this is an effort, again, grassroots from the parent level, but definitely important to engage the administration. So I like the suggestion of the alternative school, but also the counselors, which we just met with last week, too.
It's pretty neat, Kim. It'll be exciting to see where this
And just
goes.
one quick question about funding, so I figured you'd already figured that one out too.
So funding will come, it depends on the phases of this project. So the first couple of years will actually be classes that would be taught by the professors at the University of Idaho. So they're working on some work release from the university to conduct the classes. If there's truly interest, that would be really the first phase. Followed by that, there's funding at the state level, and so we could work through the Idaho State Department of Education for that career and technical education funding specific to these types of programs.
Okay, one last follow-up. Has to do with anybody that's out of high school. Is it possible that it could be training for other community members of other ages?
Great question. That usually is dependent on the curriculum and facilities, and so that is a longer-term goal. So with the, on the horizon, there's a potential new high school. I'm sure this community has heard about that, and whether or not you're supportive, the question will come into play about a new high school for a Moscow School District. Our hope as a coalition is that this could lead to that effort, and if there's expanded facilities, it's very likely that there would be some training that would be offered to high school graduates and our community members, and that's one of the basis of career and technical education programs that are well established.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you for your time.
Are there others who would like to get up and speak? Okay, well, we will move on then to item number 5, Citizens Commission Report for Affordable Housing Commission. We'll have Bill Belknap do the introduction. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Your Honor. So my job is relatively easy this evening for this item, is just to introduce Randy to provide the commission report for you this year.
Randy kind of wears a bunch of different hats, ladies and gentlemen, and so it's kind of good. We're working him over a little bit tonight, so that's a good thing. Welcome again, Randy.
Well, thank you, and Bill, thank you for the introduction. And as Bill said, you're making this kind of easy for me tonight, too, because the proclamation for April being the housing month, you pretty well much read my whole presentation right here.
Well, I should have had you do it first, and I could just handed it to you. But anyway, it's a great proclamation, Randy.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. So, yes, my name's Randy Bokal, and I'm with the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. And our duties really were very well summarized right on down the list on the housing proclamation. But it starts out at the top where we recommend various ways to the city in which fair housing practices and affordable housing practices can be enhanced. Additionally, we look for ways to engage with the community and talk with people out there about all of the situations and things that they might encounter, especially when there might be discrimination issues that come along, and we engage with conversations about furthering affordable housing there as well. Right along with incorporating any new state laws or local laws and ordinances that happen to come along each year. So every year we take time, 2 or 3 months, to go back and do a review of our impediments to fair housing. It was an action plan that was established, 5 or 6 years ago. And we've been going through that here these last 3 months and identifying that several of the action steps have already been taken and accomplished. Some of them are continuing ongoing things as pertaining to education. And then we make this report back to you guys every year. We then separately are having numerous conversations about affordable housing practices and kind of looking at the broader scheme across America and what direction things are going in, because we know that housing costs are rapidly exceeding rising wages, and it's just getting to be a bigger and bigger challenge at every step of the way. So we consult on fair housing planning objectives and communications, and by encountering city council, we encourage and look for ways to enact practices that support fair housing. And there we are making recommendations to the mayor and the council. So anytime that new ordinances or laws come down from the federal government and the state governments, then we sit down and analyze them and try to figure out how they're going to impact us, what steps we need to take to get everybody on the same page in following the new laws. So these are our members: myself, Casey Holcomb Hawks, Linda Pike, Bruce Pittman, Melanie Wolf. Bill Belknap has been very helpful and wise guidance and helps us figure our way through some of these issues. Catherine Bonzo is our council liaison. We do have 4 vacancies, so if there are any new applications that come before City Council looking for appointments to commissions, we would certainly welcome your consideration for that. I think we have that same comment every year, too. It's a small group, but we have some very, very good conversations.
Small group with important things to do,
Well, I don't know.
Randy.
Thank you. Thank you. So some of the things that we've accomplished this last year, of course, outreach and education. We have this month of April is the Fair Housing Month proclamation. We do this every April, and thank you again for that. We did accomplish the City Fair Housing Resolution last year, which makes more of a permanency to our identity. supporting and encouraging fair housing. Each year, we have sponsored the fair housing training. The instructors are actually from the Idaho Fair Housing Council, and they bring in a couple property attorneys, and they work with local property managers and lenders to teach and instruct the step-by-step process of attaining fair housing, to make sure that there's no discrimination that goes on. This has been pretty well attended. Last year, there were over 45 attendees. The year before, I think there were about 50. That's just a photo taken of the group last year at the 1912 Center. Then we attend the farmers market a couple times every summer, just handing out some of our promotional materials and helping people understand rights and responsibilities. And I'll come back to that here in just a moment. We also started last year a housing fair. It was our first one. We had it over at the county fairgrounds, and there was a number of people that attended seeking information and guidance from lenders and property managers and developers. It was kind of an interesting thing. Casey kind of spearheaded that last year, and it was a first attempt. We're going to continue it. We think he was successful enough that that's going to be an ongoing project. So tenants' rights and responsibilities. We have created some materials, just little handout brochures, and we have worked pretty diligently at getting a number of pieces put onto the city's website under the heading of affordable housing. Some very, very good information. We steer a number of people towards the website when we're researching certain situations, but then we've got these great little handouts and brochures for people to take home with them. One of them kind of focuses on the tenant's rights. The other one focuses on the landowner's rights. All of it to really make it important that everybody has rights, but everybody also has responsibilities. So there's two sides to that little gamut. And then we have worked with ASUI and the U of I Legal Aid Clinic. We have put on some workshops up on campus, trying to get the attention of students as they're leaving student housing and going out into the marketplace to sign contracts and leases, trying to provide some education so that they know what they're getting themselves into, or trying to help them figure out ways to get them out of some of their troubles too. So in the future, we're going to, the last one regarding affordable housing. I had already mentioned we had created this proclamation defining the city of Moscow being in support of affordable housing and the practices that go along with that, yeah. And then, of course, we strongly support the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, which we have Nils Peterson here in the audience tonight as well. We've had some conversations about homelessness, some of the issues and real life stories that are going on right here in Moscow. So in the coming year, we're just at the point where we're finalizing the design for this banner, one of these little roll-up things. We'll take it along with us to the farmers market and some of the events that we participate in. We will review and update the analysis of impediments, and HUD, who has been instrumental in getting us to go through the process of obtaining the analysis of impediments to fair housing. HUD has redesigned the format for this model that we used to use. It's going to be a whole new concept. looking for other pieces of the puzzle and trying to draw out information in new ways. So that's a process that we're going to start tackling next year in 2020. That'll be a big project. It'll take us a couple of years, I'm sure, to work our way through that. So they are just finding that there's other pieces of information that are just as useful as what we used to find by searching for the impediments to fair housing. And then, of course, the fair housing training event. We used to have it in the spring, April or May, whatever fit in with the trainers that we brought in. We've gotten enough feedback from some of the participants, the property managers and the lenders, that April and May really is very, very busy times for them, and they asked if we might be able to plan it for in the fall. So at this point, this year's housing training event is going to be on September 18th. That will be at the 1912 Center, and of course, we certainly extend the invitation to any council person that might like to attend that. So I would entertain any questions that you might have.
Questions for Randy? Brandy?
Yes.
Where are those brochures to be found?
To be found. Hey, that's a very good question. We've got some over here at the Paulman Building. I've got some at home too, if you want some. But we take them with us, and we actually print them off of the printers at the Paulman Building. But we take them to all of these different events along with us. So, yeah.
Other questions for Randy? Well, Randy, thank you so much for the work that you do again on the commission, being the chair of it year after year. So thank you very much for that, and keep up the diligent efforts that you're doing.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 6, request for funding for the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust. Gary Riedner is here
Thank you, Your Honor.
to open it up.
Tonight, you're being requested by Nils Peterson on behalf of the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust to request a participation from the city in the amount of $15,000. As Nils will explain in a few moments, the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust is developing 3 townhouses on down on Southview Avenue. And in doing so, they've expended a lot of their working capital. They're working with the Idaho Housing Authority, IHFA, Idaho Housing and Finance Authority, to construct these houses. And it allows them to leverage their resources if the city were to participate to the amount of $15,000. So again, Nils will talk to you about that. It's kind of interesting tonight that we've had several things already talking about affordable housing, so it seems a perfect storm. The funding that is being requested, I would recommend that if the council decides that it wants to fund the request, that can be taken from council non-prioritized projects. Council budgeted $20,000 in fiscal year 2019. You will recall that in fiscal year 2018, Steve Bonner, who has already left, I'm sure, but he came in and asked for $6,000. He mentioned it earlier this evening to fund security cameras out by Sojourners Alliance. Council approved that in FY 2018 prior to FY 2019 starting on October 1st. So the request actually came after October 1st, so funding could only be made from fiscal year 2019. We brought that to council again and was instructed that the council still wanted to fund that and that we would take that $6,000 and appropriate it in the, if other funds weren't expended out of non-prioritized projects, so we would put that in the open budget process and appropriate that $6,000 at that time. That being said, the $20,000 that council budgeted in FY19 is still intact, and you have the capacity to fund this $15,000 request if you so desire.
Thank you.
With that, I will turn it over to Nils.
Good evening, Nils.
Thank you. First, we'll see if I can get from Randy's to mine, or maybe I'll just show Randy's again. It's pretty good. See if I can help on a very basic level.
Yeah, so it has been open once, so hopefully it's, there we go.
Okay, so
And the
slideshow.
slideshow, is that the
There we go.
icon? There you go.
From the beginning.
Perfect,
There you
thank
go,
you.
and you can advance it,
With that, perfect.
and the pointer is there.
I don't point at anything. Thank you. Ooh, the colors come out different. That's cool. First, thank you to the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. That impediments document I use annually in a grant request that we send in. The feds ask for it. So the fact that the city does it is essential to my ability to go forward. And then thank you, Randy, for moving this down 2 weeks in the calendar so that I could bat last tonight with all this other affordable housing stuff. So as Randy in the introduction said, this is a capital request. Just a real quick walkthrough of several things. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the 3-unit townhouse project that we've just gotten underway. We've done 3 houses so far in the life of the organization since I was hired in 2014. So I'm coming up at my 5th anniversary. Affordability, people bat around what it means. I always want it to mean cheap, but the feds think it means a percentage of your gross income. The thing that we talk about as a group is also transportation costs and utilities costs are really part of the story, and they're not part of the Fed definition. So we have organizations in the community that are serving different of our income demographics. Sojourners and Family Promise are helping folks who are at the below poverty line, really struggling level. Habitat for Humanity works with people who are earning between 30 and 60% of area median income, and the Housing Trust is targeting 50 to 80%. Those numbers are driven by federal and other sorts of grants and rules. I wanted to give you a sense of who those people are income-wise. These are people in our community who are earning those kinds of salaries, real jobs in our community. They can go to the bank, they can get a loan. It's just not a big enough loan to buy a house in our market. So we have to provide some form of subsidy. There is just no way around that. I've tried and thought, how do you do this magically? It doesn't happen magically. You provide a subsidy. There are 3 kinds. There's subsidy given away. We call those grants, down payment assistance. They tend to be in the range of $5,000. There's subsidy returned. It's a loan. This is what we have been doing. It's a zero interest, zero payment loan. It tends to run in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. And there's subsidy retained, and that's what I want to talk to you about. The Moscow Affordable Housing Trust it's on the cusp of acting like a land trust. We won't sell the land, we'll just sell the improvements on the land, but the level of subsidy gets bigger, and you're going to see why that's important. That end is for maximum wealth building. This end is maximum long-term affordability. We want to move in that direction. Here's what the development challenge is. So there's our buyer's capacity. Because they have that income, and 30% is what the definition of affordable is, it's also what the banks tend to use when writing a loan, 30% of your gross. That's the fair market value. And we call that the affordability gap. That piece of money that the buyer needs in order to get to the fair market value. The other part of the puzzle that I struggle with is the development cost for a modest house tends to run higher than the fair market value. There are a number of fixed costs that get inserted into the process. So I also struggle with a development gap. Carl Johnson, my board president, likes to joke that we have a business model where we lose money on every transaction, but we make it up in volume. And that second red box is where we lose money. So subsidy return model kind of works like this. The buyer gets their maximum first mortgage, but it's not big enough. IHFA provides a second loan of federal home funds to fill the gap, and that loan is zero interest, zero payments. The buyer must be income qualified, they must be an owner occupant, and they must repay at sale of the home after the first mortgage, then they pay the second mortgage. But it only happens when the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust sells to the first owner. On the next sale, when that owner sells, goes right back into the market and disappears as an affordable house. It's just a market rate house. Looking at the projects that we're hoping to do this year, and I hope to sign, knock on wood, hope to sign the contract at the end of this week with the builder. Fair market value is anticipated to be $215,000. If we use the subsidy returned model, the subsidy will be about $21,000. Those colored cells are the only households that are likely to be able to afford the house. The subsidy retained model, the land trust model, is going to help us. We will own the land outright. We will use these federal home funds to construct the improvements. The buyer will get their mortgage. IHFA, Idaho Housing Finance Association, will provide up to a $40,000 subsidy to us, not to the buyer, but to the land trust, to fill in part of that affordability gap. And we'll put in the value of the land and lease the land to the owner of the improvements. And that will fill up the affordability gap. And you can see that that's going to start to become a substantial assistance to the buyer. Then, in the ground lease, the next sale price is calculated based on the previous sale price, so that the value of all those subsidies don't get imputed into the next sale. It marches up from that box called buyer capacity, according to a formula that IHFA picked, 2% per year or CPI, whichever is lower. So there's some return, but it's held back. Using that, the $40,000 subsidy, the $28,000 value of the land on the houses that we're building, you can see the increased number of households that we expect will be able to access and purchase one of these homes. So the land trust model with the bigger subsidy strategy is going to make a wider audience able to buy a home. IHFA is Idaho Housing Finance Association. I stumble over that all the time. They get the federal block grants. Home is one of the HUD programs, and within Home is a thing called CHODO. You may have heard us referred to as CHODO. That is a community housing development organization, and it's part of Home. We've been one since 2014, and it gives us access to operating grants. So I'm not here to ask you for operating money. The top line is operating grants that we've received. Then in 2015, we got a total of $30,000 from the city. We used some of it for startup operations, and $21,000 we used to purchase the lot for the Morton Street house. So you see the 3 houses that we've done, the purchase and sold dates. But here's the problem. The first house was sold at 143, the next one at 165, the next one at 185, and the next one will be at 215. Moscow's market is just rocketing upwards. And that one, I held my breath. I wasn't sure we were going to find a buyer. I think it's getting too expensive. So let's look how the money works a little bit. When we use home funds, we are entitled to a developer fee. It's like indirect costs on a grant. It's not part of the sale with the buyer. It's something that we get after the transaction is completed. It comes around on the side, in effect. It's a percentage of the project. So for each project, we got a developer fee, put in some money from other grants on the second 2 projects. Then you see me succeeding at losing money on the jobs, but coming out with a slight net income, and that one, the big one, contains the $21,000 that the city had provided. So I got your money back out. I stewarded it that much. But we also have expenses, the cost of doing business. I didn't realize, I took this job, I thought, oh, this will be fun. Real estate's a very expensive business, and I've made some big mistakes. So there's expensive due diligence. There have been a number of projects that we've spent lawyer time and engineer time and then done nothing. And there's expensive failed projects. You may remember the Sunnyside preliminary plat that came through here. It cost $12,000 to me to get that done, and then the deal unraveled. So I didn't know that I was in that kind of venturing business, but definitely. So we have some grants for operations that we use to fund those losses, and we fund them out of our own assets. Sources of capital. successful projects and other operations, the city's funds back in 2015. Here's the rub. Most granting agencies don't want to allow capital requests, and that's what I need now. I need to buy and hold land in perpetuity. I need money for land, so it's a capital request. The new pot of money that I found and we're working our way through using is called Self-Help Ownership Program. The buyer does some sweat equity. We, quote, pay the buyer on the settlement statement for their efforts, so that will lower their buying costs a little bit. And those come from our own funds or from grants for doing sweat equity activities. And then SHOP provides us $15,000 a lot for land or infrastructure. So we've bought 3 lots at $28,000. If we can get $15,000 a lot for those, we start to get some of our money back out to work with. We expect that money, but not until late in the fall when we start selling. So this is the project we're working on for this year. The developer fee, it's a 3-unit project. It's a townhouse. It's got 3 buildings touching each other. For 1 unit, developer fee of $34,800. Some other grants we've already lined up. There we go with expenses. We're going to overrun our budget again. So we have some net income, and then we have the land minus SHOP costs, minus, I hope, the request that you will honor tonight of $5,000 per lot for 3 lots. So we'll have a net investment of $6,800 come Christmas. And we'll have a small income from the project. Let me answer a couple questions about land trusts. We will write a 99-year lease to the buyer of the house, and the lease rate will be low. It's typically about $50 a month. Sort of operating costs of just having it there. The home buyer will pay taxes on the improvements, and I believe the homeowner exemption will apply. We will seek to have the county waive the taxes on the land because of the kind of mission that we're working on. My colleagues in Sun Valley say, oh yeah, of course. They have done some land trust houses. They believe that it should be a no-brainer. I'm waiting to see. Insurance will be paid by the homeowner to the satisfaction of their lender on the improvements. Art, you had this question. What if we close? What happens? First of all, each lot is designed for fee simple ownership, so there's no big messy entanglements. They could just be transferred. We can transfer them, our lease will allow that, to a successor organization, which could be IHFA if there are still federal funds entangled with it. They may want to step in and take responsibility to steward the federal funds. Or it could be another entity with a similar mission to ours. Or we could transfer the land to the homeowner with some kind of a lien to capture at least some of the value, which would then be paid to some successor organization. So if the housing trust does close, we're prepared for an orderly way of unraveling all of our financial assets. I think there's a low risk of closure once we get to a number of units because there'll be this income stream from the rentals. It won't pay a director to add more, but it would pay enough to keep body and soul together to monitor the leases. So that's what the 1 unit of the project we're working on looks like, and I'm open to any questions.
Questions from the council for Nils?
Nils, most of the questions that we asked in committee you've addressed here, and thank you for that. Save some time. And in terms of the lease thing, from the homeowner's perspective, that was my biggest concern, is that if you own a home on someone else's dirt and then they want to sell the dirt and tell you to get your building off of it, then they're in trouble. So addressing that was
99-year lease should address
that
their
should
needs.
do that. Yeah.
I thought you talked about the description of the townhouses and that the walls weren't going to be inside. And I thought that would.
Common wall.
Common wall,
So
yeah.
that they will share a party wall.
And they were having, was the parking also in there? Did you also do garages?
Yep, you can see it there in the image on the left. There's a 1-car garage and then parking in the driveway for a second.
The reason I brought it up is because when you were talking to the commission, they liked the design, and so I was allowing you to just kind of explain a little bit more about it. So could you explain a little bit more about it?
Sure. The house is 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1-car garage, 1,400 square feet. The Morton Street house was a 2-bedroom house and felt there was a pressure that it ought to have a 3rd bedroom. In terms of families wanting to purchase it, we needed to step up to do a larger house. That drove us way up in price. That bedroom is worth a lot of money, it turns out. So this is a house that's more geared for a family. It's sunk into a hillside. That helped with the price of the land a little bit, but not much. So the ground floor is got light to the front and sides, and then the second floor is above grade, and that's actually how you get to the backyard, is upstairs. One of the requirements that IHFA, well, HUD puts on them, they put on us kind of thing, is accessibility. And there are 3 levels of that standard. There's what we think of as ADA, as a commercial accessibility. There's a fair housing accessibility, which is a lower bar. And then there's one called visitability. And that's the one that we're required to achieve to the maximum extent possible. And I think of visitability is that grandma using a wheelchair can come for Thanksgiving, but you can't spend the night. That is, you can enter through a wide door without bumps or stairs. You can be in the main living spaces. You can access a bathroom, but the bedrooms don't have to be accessible. So in our 2-story design, we achieve all of the visitability on 1 floor. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to ask, I wanted you to follow up on the Sun Valley comment that they said we should be getting it. You know, they're like Sun Valley with the taxes. What's that about?
So my counterpart in Ketchum-Sun Valley runs a land trust, and they have already gone over these hurdles where they have gotten their county commissioners to give them an exemption from property taxes on the land that is sitting under the house. The house still pays property taxes. So but I do not have that agreement with our county commissioners because I don't have a house with which to ask.
And I have one more to follow up. Since we've been talking about climate change in the issues and stuff, is any of that available, solar panels or the different types of aspects that you can do for, I guess, energy efficiency or?
Thank you. So IHFA requires us to build energy efficiently. They give us a menu of different ways we could do it, and we pick one of those from the menu. And it's a gamut of the sorts of things you'd expect: water-efficient toilets and showers and sinks, and efficient lighting, and overhead ceiling fans to help, make the air seem more comfortable. We are putting a heat pump into these houses because resistance electric heating is an inefficient heating, and gas furnace is a carbon footprint heating. And so we decided to bite the bullet and go the rest of the way. That happens to give us air conditioning as well. And so we are doing as much as we can, given our constraints, to make it an energy efficient house, because utilities are part of the cost of affordable housing. And we engineered the roof, it faces south, we engineered the roof to carry the weight of a solar panel array, but we're not putting it there. Our owner could.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for?
Yeah,
Karen?
I have a couple questions, but beforehand, I just wanted to disclose that in the last month, I joined the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust Board. Although I will still be casting a vote tonight, I don't think that should affect that. But yeah, I did have a couple questions. So in the case that the trust would have to be managed by IHFA, what would that look like? In terms of, do they manage any other trusts? Would they continue to manage it in perpetuity?
I really don't know.
Okay.
That crisis has not arisen for an organization in Idaho yet. And I imagine that they would love to hand it off again if they could find a successor organization to take it. But somebody's got, if there's 40,000 of federal funds in there, somebody's got to make sure those get honored. So I don't know what it would be like. I
Okay.
don't want to go there.
I hope not either. In the case that it went to or needed to go to another organization, is there one that does exist currently that would fall into that category of having a similar mission?
Habitat for Humanity. I don't know that they would step up and take it on. I talked to them about land trusts ideas. I don't think Sojourners is the right entity in our community, or Family Promise. If we had a housing authority, which is a quasi-governmental sort of entity at the county level, that might be another that could at least manage it, but I don't know what that path would be.
And hopefully we never have to find out.
Right.
But yeah, I wanted to ask. I love this. I think it's a long-term solution to affordable housing in the way that a fee simple organization never will be. And I think this is a really exciting moment for us to commit.
I very much agree. I think it's a great idea. It's a way to bring land that's probably pretty marginal for building for a developer into the picture. And because it's the home buyer doesn't have to buy the land, it certainly helps out with the purchase cost of the property. And I think it's an experiment we should be doing.
Thank you.
Big benefit to maintaining it as an affordable home for a longer term instead of just the first buyer. I mean, that seems.
Right. When I first started, and it was this fee simple sale with the subsidy, and I asked my counterpart at IHFA, well, how does this work? Do it faster, she says. That's how you get more of them, do it faster. I haven't been able to follow that direction. So I like the land trust model as a better way of.
We feel your pain, Nils, on
Doing faster.
on things. You thinking about 8th Street there?
With that, I move
If I may,
to,
I'm
sorry.
to interrupt. It says recommend approval. It should just be approved.
I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay. I move to
Sorry.
approve the MAHT request for $15,000 for assistance in the cost of property for affordable housing project and authorize expenditure of funds from legislative non-prioritized projects.
Second?
Okay, well, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Ann to approve the MAH request for $15,000 for assistance in the cost of the property for affordable housing project and authorize expenditure of the funds from the legislative non-prioritized projects. I'll start to roll with you, Ann.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Nils.
much.
Nice presentation. Okay, folks, with that, we'll move on to item number 7, downtown survey report. Jen Piffner is with us this evening. Hello, Jen.
Hello. One moment, we'll switch to the next PowerPoint. All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. We have before you a report that stems from a discussion that began last May in 2018 when the Planning and Zoning update was approved by the City Council with some amendments. There was a discussion at that time about the conditional use permit process for educational institutions in the Central Business District, which is primarily downtown. In August, Council then directed staff to prepare a survey. We did actually 2 surveys at Council's direction. That was a residence survey or a citizen survey regarding this matter, and then also a property owner or business owner survey. We took the fall to administer that survey, the winter to tabulate those results, and I'm pleased to introduce Kyle Snyder, who is a Masters of Public Administration intern from the University of Idaho, who tabulated those results and prepared the report that's in your packet this evening. With that, I'll have Kyle give a rundown of the results, and then if you have any questions, be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Good evening, Kyle.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council, staff. So, as Jen said, I calculated the surveys And we had about 12,000 resident surveys sent out with 293 responses with a 24% response rate. 276 business surveys that were sent out with 110 responses, giving us a 39% response rate from them. The survey was split up into a couple different sections. The first section was 3 questions in which the respondents could answer on a 1 through 6 Likert scale. Strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, and don't know. And then the next part was 2 statements in which they could respond on that same scale, and then also they had an opportunity to list comments, positive or negative. Here is the questions for 1A through 1C that appeared on the survey. And getting into the results, resident question 1A, additional public and private colleges and universities should be allowed in the central business district with an approved conditional use permit. You can see here that 58.36% strongly agreed or disagreed with this statement, 30.72 strongly agreed or strongly disagreed or disagreed with the statement, 30.72 strongly agreed and or agreed with this statement, 8.19 were neutral, and 2.73 either don't know or were non-response. What resident question 1B, same question but without an approved conditional use permit, 82.94 strongly disagreed and or agreed with this statement, 7.51 strongly agreed and or agreed with this, and then 3.41 were neutral, 6.14.
I really appreciate that you shortened the digits after the decimal in the packet. And so just for expediency, maybe you could just round up.
Yeah,
while you talk.
yeah, okay, I will. 1C, you can see here, 60.4 strongly agreed and agreed, 25.6 strongly disagreed and or disagreed, 8.5 were neutral, and 5.5 don't know and or non-response. Business response question 1A with an approved conditional use permit, 58.2 strongly disagree and or disagreed, strongly agreed and or agreed, got a 33.6 response rate, and then 6.4 were neutral and 1.82 were don't know or non-response. Business question 1B without an approved conditional use permit, 79% strongly agreed and or disagreed with this, 13.6 strongly agreed and or agreed, 13.6 were neutral, and 3.6 were don't know or non-response. Business response question 1C, 60.9 strongly agreed and or agreed, 30% were strongly disagreed and or disagreed, 1.82 don't know or non-response, and 7.27 were neutral. The next part of the survey, which you guys have seen, allowed for comment section afterwards too. So do you believe the current public and private colleges and universities are a positive or negative feature of Moscow? 49.5 were responded with somewhat negative or extremely negative. 11.6 were neutral, and then 2.73 were don't know or non-response. 36.2 were extremely positive, somewhat positive. These were the total comments. The top 3 total positive comments from residents were economic growth, more people, the WWAMI program. Top 3 negative comments were parking slash traffic, NSA slash Christchurch, and loss of tax revenue. Business response question 2. You can see right here that there is a 47.3 somewhat negative or extremely negative impact, 41.8 extremely positive and or somewhat positive, 7.27 were neutral, and 3.64 don't know or non-response. And then the top 3 comments for positive comments were economic growth, more people slash students, and building renovation. And then top 3 negative were parking, loss of tax revenue, and NSA in Christchurch. And the redactions from the comment section on the back were citizens' names. So we had to redact those from the list. Survey question 3, You can see for residents right here, 63.5 were somewhere negative and or extremely negative, 23.2 extremely positive and or somewhat positive, 9.9 were neutral, and 3.4 don't know and or non-response. Top 3 positive comments were economic growth downtown, more people/students, and building renovation. Negative were prevents future downtown business, parking and traffic, and NSA in Christchurch. Business respond to this was 62.7 or somewhat negative or extremely negative, 27.3 extremely positive and somewhat positive, 5.5 neutral, and 4.6 were don't know and or non-response. And then the top 3 negative comments were economic growth downtown, more people, or positive comments, sorry, economic growth downtown, more people/students, building renovation. And then top 3 negative comments were parking, traffic, prevents future downtown business, and losing small business community to a college campus. Any questions?
Okay,
you can
questions
take?
from the council for? I think we'll kind of chew through this, Kyle, and we'll ask you back up if we
Okay.
need to have you or Jen answer something. And we'll turn it over to council at this time. Would you guys like to proceed?
Yeah, thank you for including all the comments at the request we had at the committee meeting. It's just nice to see the verbiage and thoughts alphabetized and to read through them, so thanks for doing that.
I was glad that the redactions were people's names instead of other comments that might have appeared. So, but we asked a lot of questions back during the committee meetings, and I think this survey provides us a lot of information that we need to build action plans and further decisions with, because before we were just shooting from the hip anecdotally about what the community wanted or what they didn't want. And I think this really fills a gap effectively in the level of our knowledge relative to the perception of colleges and universities in the central business district.
Brandy, you have?
Yeah, I think one of the things I was, thought was interesting was the close similarity between the general citizen responses and the downtown business communities. It was just interesting that they were quite similar, so I think we, and it seems to be a high reliability from the statistical assessment that was provided in more detail in the previous committee meeting, so that was just interesting to me.
Well, the percentages of the survey that came out are very worthwhile, and as far as a measure of really how people feel, and it is a pretty good percentage to let us know. And actually, I got to share things with folks. I've been kicking around this very thing myself when I was on P&Z back in 2003, back in the day, and we talked about a bunch of these things, and it's been just kind of a unique way of doing things, I guess, for a number of years. So it's kind of nice and enlightening to get a chance to really see how things are going with this. But with that being said, and every one of us, whether you're a counselor or myself as a mayor or any other on P&Z or whatever, have been through these different, I won't call them battles, but interesting conversations that we've had in front of us that we've had to deal with as a body. And of course, that's what we do. We deal with issues and situations. So, Catherine?
Well, mine was when we had the big conversation, we had, P&Z had brought forward the whole new document. We had had the discussion about where to block out educational services, and then we kind of dug into what that meant. And so I want to move forward and put that X in that block for educational services that are universities and colleges in the downtown district.
Yeah, and I think that encompassed 2 codes, I believe, in the educational institution, and that what this specifically asks for input on is private and public colleges and universities. So that's what I would also forward, for as far as the direction that we ask city staff to provide the surveys to give us this information. Now we have the information, and it seems quite clear to me that there's a 2-to-1 majority that feels moving forward They don't want more.
Yeah, I just didn't feel like we need to push it back into P and Z. I felt like we could take action ourselves.
Although I think that it's required that it just
Well,
goes to P
Bill-
and Z
Bill
for the
needs to
hearing.
speak
Well,
on this 'cause
that's
it's
why
a-
I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any code amendment to the zoning code does have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their
Oh.
review. They have to conduct a public hearing, and then they have to provide you with their recommendations. So the council, only in those instances of an emergency ordinance or an interim ordinance can the council take action without the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation. So the action this evening would be to forward the survey and whatever direction the council concludes with to the Planning and Zoning Commission for them to review the information and prepare an ordinance for the council's consideration.
Okay, and we can do that with one motion?
You can.
Please help me cobble this together.
So could
Do
make
you,
a-
unless someone has it written down?
Well, let's get some information on this side of the podium over here. We haven't,
Yeah, I think it's time for us to send the issue back down to planning and zoning for consideration of the survey and how to potentially fit the results of the survey in with the zoning code, given input from the community in a public hearing sense, and with the results of this, and give it back to P and Z, let them have a look at it, see what they come up with, and then provide the input and potential ordinance language back up to the council. I don't
So-
want to handcuff them by saying, this is the result we expect.
well, P and Z is as a separate body, and as, if they go through a public hearing process or whatever they go through, they can't be dictated by council what
Right.
they are gonna do, or that's exactly what you're saying, you're absolutely correct. I was on P and Z, you were on there for a decade, Jim was on there for a number of years as well. And so, us as a body, what council can do, of course, is just like what you said, refer this to P and Z, have them look into it, have them see exactly what we saw, and then see what the direction is that they come from, whatever the ordinance standpoint is.
But I have a question.
I would,
Hang on a second,
I would
Jeannie.
say see what they're going to see from the data, not see what we saw from the data. You
What's
just
it-
said that, and I just
did.
want to
Well,
be clear that,
Excuse my misverbiage,
Oh,
Gina, that isn't what I meant. They will make a decision because they're all smart people. They don't
Indeed.
need us telling them what they need to do.
that was the only clarification I wanted to make, so.
Ann's busting at the seams. I think she wanted to have something to say down there. I seen her.
I disagree. It's always nice when we have data to help make decisions, and that's not always the case certainly, but I think it's just easy to fall into confirmation bias where you hear the things that you already believe and then you kind of shape your opinion on that. So I just really love that we have some info to do what we will.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to attempt it.
Okay, let's hear what you got to say.
I move to have planning and zoning consider the educational services, specifically colleges and universities, in the central business district, because that's what the survey was about, and use those results from the survey to update the code. But what code do I have to say?
Zoning code for
Let's
the
bring that up to Bill.
CBD. And
Yeah.
Central business.
So just, I guess there's kind of two lines of discussion going on. The first of which was to share the survey information and let the P and Z come to its own conclusions. The second is looking at a more directive request of the commission to consider and prepare an ordinance that would disallow essentially colleges and universities within the central business district. So I guess if that
That's
is the
the one I'm
intent,
saying.
then I just want to kind of have that update was a little bit ambiguous about what it meant. But if the goal is for the commission to consider and prepare an ordinance that would disallow colleges and universities within the central business district, and that would be pretty clear direction to the Planning and Zoning Commission of what the council's intent was. Now, the commission can still review it, can report back to the council that they disagreed with that if they felt that, but I think with this information, they would probably concur.
So,
I'll second that motion.
okay, yeah, so with the updated language to consider and prepare, and then you said specifically to disallow the educational services that were from the survey that stated colleges and universities in the central business district.
That didn't sound quite right, Catherine.
I think
Sorry.
I would leave the educational services out. There
Okay.
are about 8 different codes underneath that. We were specifically looking at the colleges and universities. Now, the commission can look at other uses within that use definition to see if they would also make some recommendations there. But if the council's specific interest in this surveys was specifically about colleges and universities in the Central Business District, I would leave it with that.
And that's
Just would
exactly what the
omit
survey was
educational
about.
services.
Right, so I'm just,
Yeah, 6112 and 6113.
Correct.
yeah, oh, even you remember the numbers,
And
wow.
there could be the little asterisk, that could be what planning and zoning, how they could assess if they agree with that direction based on their assessment of
Did
the
that
survey.
make sense? Did we,
And of course, after a public hearing, P and Z might decide to do nothing, in which case the current ordinances still apply.
Gary?
Just trying to make sure that P and Z is clear of the direction of the city council. I believe what you're trying to do is to direct the P and Z to eliminate these educational institutions in downtown. Is that correct?
I think it's not to eliminate the
Further.
existing ones, it's
Further.
to eliminate further
Precisely.
applications.
Exactly. But to stop the further application of the current process. And I think when you say, look at the data, if you invite them to come to their own conclusions, I mean, your direction should not be ambiguous. Your direction should be, we're directing you to do this. And having the data is great, but I'm assuming you don't want them to read the data and not follow your direction.
Can I try, to move this to planning and zoning to follow the procedures of holding a public hearing in order to change the zoning code for the central business district to no longer permit 611?
his words were disallow. Bill
Okay,
said disallow,
disallow
Either one works.
We have to.
6112 and
Either one works.
6113 in their zoning code.
specifically. Okay, if that,
That's good.
that's good?
Does
So I
that
second
sound-
it.
Does does that sound good to you guys over there? Okay, let's, before we go further, let's read what the motion is, so that we're clear on it.
So-
Everybody up here is clear on it. Because we-
So then I've made it, you've
Well,
seconded.
okay, this isn't about this is Kaylee's first crack at this incidentally. She's doing great, so Reader's gonna help
Going
her.
by Catherine's motion, move to send it back to planning and zoning to disallow the,
Conditional use permit.
the allowance of educational institutions in the central business district.
Should it be specific to 6112 and 6113
Well, they would be.
in the motion, or is that not
I
necessary?
don't think so, because would they be, I mean, that's what they'd be
Don't know
looking at if they make the decision, Bill, isn't it?
Well, if I clarify, so we're using kind of two different terminologies. Educational institutions was our old defined term. We now call it private, colleges and universities, and those are the two NIAX codes that Brandy referenced. I think the commission will understand, certainly with the survey, what this discussion is about. So I don't think we have to be too worried about that. But educational institution is a little bit of our old term in the old code. Prior to the NIAX update, we now would call it colleges and universities.
I've been here longer than you, Bill, that's why I'm using the old term.
Well, what I was remembering too is I felt like we were going back, because when you did your presentation originally, didn't the city council in the 1920s, they had, their whole reason that they were creating the central business district was to protect it really from the University of Idaho, so they would say like, this is our space, and that's your space over there.
Anybody here that was live in 1920 that knows about that?
No, you did a presentation. No, Bill,
What?
he did a presentation that I took notes on, and he was talking about the history.
I'm not being cynical on it, Catherine. The thing
Okay.
of it is, the point I'm trying to make is things change in 100 years.
Yeah,
That's the point that I was trying to make, sorry.
okay.
Does it all sound like you have what you need for the motion and the second?
Did anybody
Catherine made the motion, Brandy seconded it, right?
Yes.
Everybody understands it? You know what the motion is? I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, so the motion stands, and the action will be directed to P and Z.
Hopefully.
We good on that over there, Gary?
Yep.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to item number 8, which is the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency Annual Report, and Bill Belknap will present. Thank you very much, Kyle and Jens.
I thought it was called educational services now. It was a huge category and it had all these lists.
Changed it. I think we changed it.
So it's not,
That's what he was just saying, the national blah, blah, blah.
I'm remembering the
next
book.
codes.
Gotta take better notes.
God really wants to hear about the URA.
Thank you and good evening. So this is that opportunity once a year that I have to come and report on the activities of the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency to the City Council. Under state law, the agency is required to file a report by March 31st of each year with its governing body about the activities that it has undertaken over the course of the preceding year. The agency board approved the annual report at our meeting of March 21st, and then that was transmitted to the city clerk after that. But this evening here, I am to give a report, cover those details, and give you some more additional information. So this is our annual report that covers the fiscal year 2018. It covers activities of the agency as well as financial information related to expenditures and revenues that have been received by the agency as we run through this. So the overall organization of the annual report includes just a general profile of the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, our agency board of commissioners, the makeup and who they represent. We have 2 city council members who serve on the agency board, 1 county commissioner, and then 4 general citizen members at large. We then move into the significant achievements for the 2018 fiscal year, and then also a discussion of the districts of the agency. We currently actually only have 1 active district, but we do have 6 lots that we retain and hold in Alturas, which was the first district of the agency, so we do touch on that in the report as well. So that's the Alturas Technology Park District that was closed in 2015, and then our 1 current active district with Legacy Crossing. As required by state law, we also have an inventory of any real property that's owned by the agency, its current status, and the progress towards disposition of the property as well. We also provided an opportunity for public comment before the agency board. When the annual report is received, we publish a public notice, and we receive public comments at a time, and then those are included in the report as it moves forward, as well as just legal notices for our publications, as well as financial statements close out that report. So as we look at the general profile agency, we do look at the annual report and our strategic plans both as educational opportunities to share information about the agency and its activities. So we cover kind of general profile of the agency and its history, the formation of the agency back in 1996, and then our current membership of our board and makeup. We also provide some information about tax increment financing. That's what this graphic represents, to help educate those who may review the report on how the agency receives revenues and undertakes projects and activities. As I mentioned before, we have a 7-member board of commissioners that is chaired by Steve McGeehan, and then Brandy is the vice chair for the group. It's also, Art serves as our 2nd city council representative. We have Ron Smith, Steve Drown, Dave McGraw is our Latah County Commissioner representative, and Trent Bice that rounds out the membership of the group. So there were 3 kind of achievements that were highlighted in the annual report this year. Those include the expansion of the Legacy Crossing District to include Main Street adjacent to the district boundary. That was a fair amount of effort and work to go through the eligibility study, the public infrastructure needs assessment, the financial feasibility assessment, to move that boundary about 300 feet to the east of where it was previously along the alley just on the west side of Main Street. That is an important action of the agency to open the door for partnership between the agency and the city to refurbish the deteriorating public infrastructure we have downtown on Main Street. The agency does have, as I mentioned, 6 lots for sale in Alturas, and all 6 lots are currently under exclusive negotiation agreements for sale and development. 2 of those lots are under exclusive negotiation agreements with Shane and Janet Needham for the expansion of Alturas Analytics within the park. And then 4 of the remaining 4 lots are under agreements with MZ for the development of a new office complex for their expansion and growth. So we are excited to see those lots moving forward towards redevelopment in the park. The agency also finally completed the remediation on the 6 and Jackson property, and our samples that were just taken in December of 2018 finally showed us back into compliance with groundwater standards. So that's an important milestone. We're now shifting into the final quarterly sampling, and if we can get 3 more of those in compliance, then we'll be fully shut down on our remediation effort and having achieved our goals and objectives on the site. As I mentioned, we do provide a description of the two districts, as I called them. Alturas Technology District, again, that was formed in 1996, had a base valuation of $6.48 million at the time it was created, and that blue line is that base valuation when the district was created. And after that time, we saw nearly $22 million in valuation growth over the life of the district with new business development expansion in the area. And at the time of closure in 2015, the valuation of the district was $27.4 million that was returned to all the taxing districts to levy against. We also had about $850,000 in excess revenues that we had accumulated in the last couple of years of the life of that district that we refunded back to all the taxing districts. So those funds were refunded back, and the board has also made the decision that any sale proceeds of the 6 lots in Alturas Technology Park will also be rebated back to the taxing districts so that they can have the benefit of those revenues moving forward. Within Legacy Crossing, it is now a 169-acre district. It was previously 163 acres in size. With that expansion that happened this summer, we added 6 acres to the district to pick up that adjacent portion of Main Street. The base valuation and creation of the district in 2008 was $47.7 million. And the most recent valuation in 2018 was $67.7 million. So we are seeing substantial growth and activity within the district. That district, having been formed in 2008, is programmed for closure in 2032. But you can see this trend we're having here with the increment starting to build within the district with the development activities. This district was formed at the peak or the bottom of the trough of the recession, so we've had some limited activity, but we are seeing that trend changing recently. As I mentioned, we also have that inventory. There are 6 lots in Alturas that the agency owns, as well as the 6 in Jackson property. All properties are currently under negotiation agreements for development. The 6 in Jackson property is under an exclusive negotiation agreement with Roderick Olps for development on that site, and I already kind of referred the 4 under agreements with MZ and 2 with Shane and Janet Needham. Within the report, we also have our financial statements, or audited statements for the prior fiscal year. I won't go through those because you can't read them on the screen, but I do have a couple charts to show some of our trends. So this is property tax revenue and investment income. We have fairly limited investment income. This is just largely any cash we have is in the local government investment pool. It returns a little bit of revenue. You can see it ranges from about $3,700 into 2014. To about $7,300 here in 2018. So a little bit of interest earnings to the agency. The bulk of our funds come from property tax revenues, and you can see this 2015 was the last year with the Alturas district open. So we were receiving revenues for both Legacy and Alturas in that fiscal year. So total revenues were about $586,000 at that time. With the closure of the district, and since that time, we have only had revenues coming from Legacy Crossing for 16 and 17, there was roughly about $180,000 per year, and we started to see some increase here in the 18 fiscal year at $228,000, and we do expect that to continue to grow more rapidly in the future. As we look at our expenses, we have administration as this large item here on the top. We have our depreciation, which historically, the agency still had the public improvements within Alturas Technology Park on our books, and we were depreciating those. With the closure of the district, those assets were transferred to the city's books, and so our depreciation expenses went to 0 after 2016. And then we have interest expenses here as well. That's primarily, we had some debt out on Alturas. Those notes were finally paid off in 2014. Since that time, we've only had the interest payments on the single debt instrument that we have on the 6 in Jackson property. So since 2016, that's been just $15,000 down to $13,000 as that bond's been paid off. You do see our operational expenses, administrative expenses did increase considerably in the last 2 years, and this is activities going on in the district that I'll highlight in a little more detail here in a couple slides. Really from 14 to even into 16, it's largely was just kind of holding steady. The agency's general operational expenses up until about 2015 were about a little over $80,000 a year, just covering general operations. So there's very little expenditures really above that mark until we get into 2017, and then we get into some of the environmental remediation on 6th and Jackson and other public improvement projects that we participated in that I'll highlight here in a minute. Total net position, in 2015, we had that $850,000 in excess revenues that had been accumulated in the Alturas district. So we were sitting at a fairly high net position at that point in time. We refunded all those monies back to the taxing districts, which brought our position down considerably. And then as we have been making some expenditures in legacy to facilitate projects, our total net position has declined a little bit as we've gone throughout that time. We do have a little bit of reserved fund balance here for debt service payments as well. Overall, our net position, we have about $404,000 invested in capital assets, about $44,000 that's restricted for debt service, and then the remaining balance of our net position at $729,000 is unrestricted this time. There are land assets that are included in that number as well. And our expenditures, as I mentioned, we have our capital outlay, which is the green line. That did peak here a little bit in 16 with some of the remediation activities happening on 6th and Jackson and frontage improvements that were occurring at that time. We had our debt service as we paid off the note in Alturas. Our debt service has dropped, and these are just our annual payments of principal and interest on the legacy crossing bonds. But our program expenses really have taken off with a lot of the projects we've been engaging in legacy, so you have seen those expenditures increasing over the last 2 years. Long-term debt trend is declining. Again, we really only have 2 forms of debt beyond this time period. We have the bonds for Legacy Crossing for the 6th and Jackson property. We also have a repayment due to the calculation error with Latah County. They were making some repayments of increment that we received in error. I also want to take a little opportunity to talk about our strategic plan as well. So this was a document that the agency adopted in 2017, and we were just starting on the process to update this. It's intended to be kind of a 5-year plan, updated about every 2 years because it includes a capital improvement plan identifying those projects we anticipate undertaking in that 5-year time period. It also is a great educational tool to explain the agency, what we do, what our mission and purpose is. So we do talk about our mission, which is to grow, the mission of the agency is to promote sustainable economic growth, vitality, and community enhancement through collaboration and community investment. And so it really does kind of focus on what it is that is the agency's mission and our vision. We talk a little bit about our strategic planning and capital improvement planning in that process, and we're kind of in this renewal cycle now that we've gone to kind of 2 years on that plan, working on updating that effort. We describe also how we work with our partner entities. We are not the planning entity, we are the agency that helps implement projects. And so we work with a number of entities from the Chamber of Commerce, the Department of Commerce for the state, Grittman Medical Center, ITD, the city, the county, the university, Smart Transit. These are all of our partner entities that we assist and rely upon their long-term planning documents to help identify improvements that the community needs within the districts that the agency operates. We, in the document, also describe what we call our public investment portfolio. It's kind of how we categorize and organize our financial activities within the district, from community infrastructure to streetscape enhancements to community placemaking and other special projects. So we can help kind of describe what we do. And then this, which I'm sure you can all read, is our 5-year capital plan that identifies work within each of those areas. And we kind of identify from 2017 here to 2021 those projects we're anticipating that are on our radar and when we need to accumulate funding in order to facilitate those. So some of our recent projects, so a couple here up front are somewhat older contributions or commitments, and we work in kind of 2 different ways. Oftentimes we work in reimbursement agreements where a developer has to fund an improvement and then we repay them from tax revenues that we receive from their project. Other times we will make just a direct financial contribution depending upon the situation. So the Anderson Silos project, which is the concrete grain silos just south of the 6th and Jackson property, the agency previously entered into a reimbursement agreement of just a little over $110,000 for environmental remediation that happened on that site. The agency also entered into a reimbursement agreement with MZ when they moved from Alturas Technology Park to the prior Daily News building in the amount of $45,000 for reimbursement for streetscape improvements in front of the property, as well as extension of the city's fiber optic network to serve the facility. The agency also contributed $27,000 to the construction of a new downtown restroom that was completed here a couple years ago. We also contributed $90,000 to the Varsity Diner project for reimbursement for public sidewalk replacement. So we only contribute to public infrastructure. So in this case, it was the repair and replacement of those public sidewalks, decorative light fixtures, and other elements that are included in the public right-of-way. The agency also contributed $38,000 in a reimbursement agreement to the Dawson Corner project. That's the Stax location on 6th Street. For reimbursement for replacement of public sidewalk that was deteriorated in poor condition. On 6th and Jackson, we have expended about $229,000 or so in environmental remediation, streetscape improvements, and utility undergrounding, preparing that site for redevelopment. And we also entered into a reimbursement agreement with Gritman Medical Center in conjunction with their medical office building on South Main in the amount of $600,000 to reimburse the complete reconstruction of 8th Street and Main Street, the public sidewalks, the decorative light fixtures, and other furnishings and improvements that were done in conjunction with that project. The agency committed $15,000 to the Highway 8 underpass, so that is the underpass located there at Steiner and White on Highway 8. And so we did contribute $15,000 toward local match for the construction of that project. It was just completed last fall. And then we also last fall contributed $34,000 to the Turnstone Flats project. That was where the owner was partnering with the city to do a sidewalk replacement project. We wish to include brick pavers and the decorative light fixtures. And so the agency contributed that funding directly to that project in order to include those elements that we want to include in all of our downtown streetscape work throughout the downtown core. We also made a small commitment to the Quad Cities Nissan property. At the time, ITD was in town doing the large paving project. They wished to remove the almost continuous driveways on the frontage of that property on 3rd Street. And so we contributed a little over $5,000 for that sidewalk installation in conjunction with that project. We also just last year contributed a little over $10,000 to a floodplain study. That was a partnership between the agency and the city council to study the floodplain down near the South Couplet, where the current floodplain map included bridges that were removed back in the mid-90s and were resulting in erroneous boundaries for the floodplain in that area. We had, I think, 27 properties that we will be removing from the floodplain as a result of that study. And so the agency contributed $10,850. Again, that was jointly shared between the city and the agency. It helped facilitate redevelopment of several sites within the district. It also affected property owners outside the district to alleviate their need to carry flood insurance where it's not necessary. The agency also partnered up with the city to fund a study for a second underpass to be located just south of the South Couplet, using the bridge at the Paradise Creek crossing of US 95 South Main. So that study came back with positive results that it's feasible, much like the Steiner and White underpass. And that effort was jointly funded by the agency and the city. And we do anticipate that the city will make a Transportation Alternatives Program, a TAP grant application this fall for that project to be constructed a few years out. The agency is also currently working on a project on the prior Dumas Seed Warehouse. There are a 36-unit condo project is currently underway. You may recall the MOU that the agency entered into with Bloom Construction related to an old historical easement on the property and a relocation of that easement to the south side of the site to allow for a pedestrian easement along the 1st Street alignment to connect Almond Street over to Asbury and over to Ottness Park. The agency is constructing that public path as well as participating in some frontage improvements and some path amenities by adding some lighted bollards along that pathway at a cost of just a little over $73,000 on that project as well. So upcoming projects, the first of which is, as I mentioned, we are launching into an update of our strategic plan on that 2-year cycle, and we will be reaching out to have a joint meeting between the Urban Rural Agency Board and the City Council to discuss the update to the strategic plan and also look at the next 5 years of projects that we would anticipate that the city and the agency would be undertaking. We do, under our current capital improvement plan, in our adopted strategic plan, we do have a number of projects programmed out in 2020. So in next year, we're anticipating contributing $150,000 towards the reconstruction of Almond Street between 3rd and A. So as it goes in front of the county annex building and the under construction condominium project on the Dumaseed warehouse, that roadway is one of our worst condition roadways in the city. It is something that we're looking to try to help facilitate the reconstruction of that roadway. So that's a fairly large project that we have programmed in our capital improvement plan for 2020. We also are anticipating participating in the construction of Hello Walk on the 6th and Jackson site in conjunction with future development. We have $185,000 earmarked for that improvement as well in 2020. And then we are also working with the Public Arts Department or the Arts Department of the city to look at some public art installation within the district, and we have $15,000 programmed for that in 2020 as well. And then we had kind of some general streetscape improvements identified for about $30,000. Now for 2021, several years ago, well, I guess about a year and a half ago, the agency committed to contribute funding to a grant-funded project the city was requesting for a corridor improvement project on 3rd Street from Jackson to Llewellyn. So that would be a pedestrian safety enhancement project. It will replace all existing sidewalks and add lighting along the corridor for pedestrian safety. The agency had committed $87,000 towards that project to help facilitate replacing non-qualifying lights that would not be eligible for replacement underneath the grant program, as well as making additional contributions to that project. We also have about $35,000 in general district pavement improvements and $75,000 in general streetscape improvements for that year. And we are also anticipating a future phase of that pathway that goes through Otten's Park to take it further to the west. And so we have $60,000 identified for that project moving forward as well. In our last year, in 2020, we have currently programmed $125,000 toward the pedestrian underpass at South Main and 95. So that's that second underpass location. We are anticipating if it's a fall application, it may be 2022 or 2023. So we'll have to see how that timing works out. But we have that money identified to participate there. We also have another $100,000 we identified for some of the intraway beautification work around the South Couplet. So we'd like to do that in conjunction with the underpass and see how we can kind of improve the general aesthetics in that area as it exists today. We also have a little bit of money identified for a second beautification project at the Llewellyn and Highway 8 intersection at $35,000 for some landscape improvements there and other general streetscape and pavement improvements. So that just kind of, I wanted to give you kind of an overview of what we've been up to over the last couple of years, as well as other projects we anticipate undertaking in the future.
Well, Brandy and Art are on that Urban Renewal Commission, of course, and so if you got something you want to add, Brandy.
Well, one thing I would just say I think has been a real big improvement to the whole Moscow Urban Renewal Agency body is your development of that 5-year strategic plan document. I mean, it really is pretty amazing to have, planning out that far with all these projects that we can participate in and anticipating that and being able to see how we can partner with the city or other entities on those projects. And so that I think was a wonderful embellishment to really that a longer term vision. And I had one question, if you know offhand, with the 6th and Jackson project, the amount that we contributed towards that, the $229,000, do you recall offhand about how much of that was grant for the environmental remediation?
I think the total grant funds were about $164,000, I want to say. I can certainly I can look that up and let the council know, but off the top of my head, I can't recall the total amount. There was an initial grant request when we thought the remediation was going to involve one constituent, and then it changed, and the scope of the remediation was increased, and so we went back and requested additional funding, and I think it was just a little over $160,000 in total grant funds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
No, I think if you look around at what the URA's been up to since its inception up until now, there's a lot that's gone on in this town that the URA doesn't get a lot of credit for, but certainly the participation of the agency with many of these projects has really helped the town move forward economically and in terms of infrastructure, and I'm very happy to serve on that board.
You know, with what Brandy had said, that strategic plan process for 5 years out and constantly looking at that, boy, that's a nice tool to have in front of you so that you don't get quagmired and stuck
Yeah,
in the muck.
And
I'd-
find yourself without money.
Yeah,
find yourself without money, exactly.
One other comment we hear, I think that Moscow does a very good job having a county commissioner as a part of the board and working together and not fighting against each other, but, which seems to be uncommon when you look at other URAs. So I think it does, I would echo Art's comments that the group does work very well, including the county.
Gina?
I want to brag a little bit. I had a chance to go to a Site Selectors Guild conference last week in a blur of about 36 hours. And during this time, we were in a series of, the Department of Commerce representative Autumn Brassi and I were in a series of 5-minute commercials for Moscow. And I threw the URA out first, like, we've got all these great things and we've got a really strong URA. And then the Department of Commerce representative, without any prompting from me, continued it in the rest of her little 5-minute commercials. It was beautiful. You have managed to impress the state of Idaho with how we run, how you run, how the board runs our URA. And it was clear in the last, it seemed like 30 slides, but the last list of projects, that you guys have maintained a consistent, clear focus on your mission and how you can work the URA into supporting all of the vital and exciting and fun projects in our community. And it's a shining example of how it's supposed to work.
Very consistent.
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, I didn't see anything about at the Dumas property, the powerhouse thing that's going on there. It's part of Thompson's company.
Yep.
Are you participating in that, in the sidewalk improvements there at all?
We are. So in that 74,000 amount on the Dumas site, we are paying for half of the frontage improvements along the powerhouse property.
Yeah, but I knew that was a separately owned thing, and I didn't know if we
Yeah.
were participating in that.
It's all being jointly developed and constructed, so Mr. Bloom, who's doing the condo project, the city paid to have that frontage engineered, because technically his responsibility ended at that property boundary. And we have a desire to get a left turn lane there on A Street, on northbound onto Alman, to help improve flow once the A Street project ever gets constructed. That we anticipate additional traffic flow in that location, and having left turn lane there for that eastbound traffic to turn out northbound on Alman was desirable. So we wanted to get continuous sidewalks, continuous drainage and curbing, we wanted to get that turn lane in. So we did offer to participate with Mr. Thompson at a 50% rate. We'd pay half of the frontage cost on his property, because technically he may not necessarily have an obligation to complete those improvements because he's not building a new principal structure. But we did wish to have that completed. He was thankful for the assistance, and that will be all completed this summer with the Bloom project.
Yeah, and that will also help with the handicapped access on A Street, which is an arterial that's difficult for those people to deal with, so.
Good point, Jim.
I just have a question.
Gather?
Bill, do you also work with the schools and the school district? Does the agency do that, or does it just work with the city types of projects? You know, because the reason that came to mind was because of all the sidewalk improvements, and then I was just thinking about in front of all the schools.
So we can only operate in the district, so it has
That's
to be
not gonna
something
ever be
within the district, correct. And West Park really is the only school that's located within our district.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Other comments from Bill? Good report, Bill. Thank you. You did a good job of bringing it forward. Thank you very much. Okay, well, with that, we'll move on to item number 9, A Street Stage 2 Project Construction Schedule Revision. Gary Reednall will be presenting on that. Hello, Gary.
Thank you, Your Honor. What you have here before you tonight is a request from staff to proceed with ratification of the mayor's action in sending a letter to the local Highway Technical Assistance Council to delay the bid for the A Street Phase 2 project from which originally would have been bid this spring, delaying that until hopefully it'll be bid this fall or early winter. The history behind it, as you know, this project is about 30 years, maybe a little over 30 years in the making. The initial Phase 1 of A Street was completed quite a while ago, Peterson Drive West, and this phase covers Phase 2, which comes from Peterson to Home Street. It involves the reconstruction of actually putting a cul-de-sac in at Circle Drive and Line Street, and some improvements to Line Street, and a lot of parking and pavement improvements along the corridor. It is a federal aid fund, or funded project, which is essentially they are federal funds that are distributed through different agencies of the state, in this case, the local Highway Technical Assistance Council. The project was, we brought it forward, as I said, it's been about 30 years on the books, working on designing all these other things for it. In 2016, February 1st of 2016, we came forward with a proposal that was suggested to us by the LTAC board. At that time, and I have a memo I'd like to pass out to council. You can follow along.
Nils Peterson was talking about the slow process on we're dealing with. He should have stuck around.
Poster child for that.
So, in February of 2016, we came forward to you with this memo requesting at that time that we had two LTAC projects that were proceeding. One was the Mountain View Road project, which was scheduled to be constructed in 2019, and the second was the A Street project, which was scheduled to be constructed in 2000 or 2021. The Mountain View project was proposed to be funded, and we would have proceeded with construction in 2019. It would have taken about $100,000 in additional local match to move that project along. However, at the same time, we looked at, as you can see in the memo, as we looked at the A Street project, which again, as I mentioned, is about 30 years old, we looked at the funding that we had available for construction of A Street, which was to proceed, I believe, in 2021. From the memo that I just handed out, the A Street was seriously underfunded. And essentially, what we requested at that time was for the council to allow us to move forward at LTAC's direction to take funding that had been identified to move forward with Mountain View and transfer that funding to A Street. The reason was because A Street had long gray hair because it was so old, and the funding was in jeopardy. So it was determined, your hair isn't long, Ms. Taruccio. However.
Thank you for pointing that out.
So essentially at LTAC's request, it was the reallocation of that funding, which had been designated for Mountain View Road, could be transferred to A Street, and construction of that project could proceed in 2019. Now, Mountain View Road was not being dropped off, it was going back into project design, meaning that it would go back into the funding cycle, and it would take precedence over any new projects that were proposed for that funding cycle. So it seemed to be a pretty good trade. And because of the risk of the A Street project going away, council weighed that and decided to move forward. The memo that you see before you is a memo that Les McDonald, our Public Works Director, sent to me. We presented to City Council. The second option, option 2 or option B, I can't remember how it's designated, was to make that transfer and proceed with the A Street project. Again, placing Mountain View Road later in the program, probably 2021 or 2022. So we did that. So that funding is federal aid funding. That wasn't funding that was city-generated funding that was being transferred from Mountain View to A Street. That was grant funding that was just being redirected to the A Street project. So we proceeded with that. That is the first thing that occurred. The second thing that occurred was in 2018, on November 5th, we were informed that the construction funding, the federal funding for A Street was in 2 separate budget years, FY 2019 and FY 2020 federal budget years. However, the logistics of the project were such that we couldn't straddle budget years. Either it was going to be torn up over the winter, we would get remobilization expenses, those sorts of things. So the proposal was made, a discussion was had between LTAC and the city of, because there was about $1.2 million of funding that was going to be designated in, let me get this straight, designated in FY 2020, if the city were to advance funds in that amount to LTAC, then the complete construction could be pursued in 2019. Then when the federal aid funds become available, which is later in 2019 and early 2020, then the funding that the city advanced, $1.2 million approximately, would then be returned to the city. So essentially, we were prepaying the federal aid funds to get the project done in one project year. And as the council, it was reported that night that council was encouraged to do that by LTAC. We did that, and if I can go back to the council's action, essentially it was that the project would be proceed and be bid in the fall of would be bid in the fall of 2018 for a 2019 construction. Well, there were a bunch of things that happened. One was there was a software change at ITD, bidding software. That took a month out of that project. Then when it came back out, we were informed from LTAC that they wanted to make a few comments on the plans that had already been submitted. As you know, when engineers comment on plans, that means you at least have to explain them, if not revise them. Be that as it may, LTAC was going to move forward with a spring bid, and that spring bid would have taken place perhaps even today, maybe last week. Immediately when we found out about that, about 2.5 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, we thought spring bids in Moscow during a short construction season have typically one result, and that is very expensive. The project, for a couple of reasons, if it went out, was bid even a week ago or 2 weeks ago, there would be a bid window where you could submit bids. You go through the contract negotiation process, the selection process, all of the things that you have to do. Then, once a contract is negotiated, and this is a state project, right? So once the contract is negotiated, then the selected contractor has to mobilize their forces to come in and start the project. They also need to purchase their materials and all of the things that go along with a construction project. In addition, there was a very short project window. Getting it done in 1 year was the reason that we advanced the funds. So it would have had to be completed, I believe, in mid to late October of 2019. So once you start burning up the front end of that project construction timeline, you've got to keep pushing it back. So the fear was also that the project could not be completed within the construction season of 2019. And one of the reasons, as we talked about, that we wanted to do it in 1 year was so that that project wasn't open over the winter months. So with that, we went to both committees last week and requested authority for the mayor to send a letter to LTAC. Both committees said it was fine to do so after this presentation, and we would seek ratification of that action tonight. That letter was sent out at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning, so we didn't lose any time. We wanted to make sure that LTAC knew that the city wanted to hold off until 2020 in order that it's bid at an appropriate time. Our fear was not so much, you can always reject bids and then rebid at a later time. The trouble is, though, you rebid, you kind of set the bar if bids come in high, and then when you rebid later on in the year or in the next spring, people look at that and assume that was the threshold, and we didn't want to do that. We want to get good, responsive bids. We're informed by the state of Idaho that this project will be bid either in late summer, fall, or very early winter, along with a lot of ITD projects for the next year. So it should be a pretty good bid climate. And as you know, our recommendation is, when possible, making advertising for bid for construction projects in the winter, very, very early spring. I mean, I'm talking February, so that contractors are looking for projects. As we know from the 3rd Street project, contractors are very busy at this time. And especially when they've already got their crews, their contracts, their projects set up, to add another project is one of those things that it's going to come in fairly expensive. So that was the reason for the action. The committees agreed, and that's why we're here today. State still has $1.2 million of city funding. That funding, I wanted to make 2 points. One was the federal funding is still secure just because it's being constructed in 2020. That federal funding, we've been assured by LTAC, is not at risk. It's already allocated. And the $1.2 million, it is securely with the state of Idaho. It's gaining interest that's benefiting the city. We will be looking to get that funding back since we aren't moving it forward this year. So, after that long explanation, we're asking for ratification for the mayor requesting that the project be delayed for those reasons.
Jim?
Mr. Mayor, I would grudgingly approve moving the bid advertisement for A Street Stage 2 construction from fiscal year 2019 to fiscal year 2020, including ratification of committee direction for Mayor Lambert to transmit the attached letter to LTAC.
Second. Not grudgingly, though.
Okay, we have a motion by Jim and a second by Gina to approve the moving of the bid advertisement for A Street Stage 2 construction from FY 2019 to FY 2020, including the ratification of committee direction from Mayor Lambert to transmit the attached letter to LTAC. I'll start to roll with Catherine.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Thank you, Gary. There you go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Item number 10, set the 2020 budget hearing date for August the 5th,
Thank you.
2019. Gary.
Thank you. This represents, I think, the 25th time that I've done this. Idaho code requires that the city council set a public hearing date for the budget. And typically what we've tried to bring forward is the first regular meeting in August. There's a reason for that. The reason is, once we have our budget workshop, which is typically the Monday and Tuesday, the second week of July, all the budget prep predates that. Once council says go ahead, make your amendments, whatever. We then revise the budget again, we publish the draft budget document, and then we have the public hearing. We like to put it as soon in August as possible. And the reason is that if for some reason the council cannot come to an agreement and pass the budget under suspension of the rules requiring 3 full and complete readings, then we will have to present it on 3 different occasions. So if it's presented on the first meeting in August, we would have the second meeting in August, the first meeting in September, and then we have to have our L2, or our designation of taxes that that the council intends to levy to the county in plenty of time that the budget year can kick off on October 1st. So traditionally, we've looked for the first meeting in August. But it takes specific council action to set that public hearing date. So that's what we're requesting you to do tonight.
I would move that we set the hearing date for August 5th for the fiscal year 2020 budget hearing. Is that what we need to do?
That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Brad, I think Art got the second in charge. Okay, Brad, we got a motion by Brandy, second by Art to set August 5th, 2019 as the public hearing date for the City of Moscow FY 2020 budget. I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, we are set. Okay, with that, that brings us to the end of our agenda, so we'll go into reports. I'll start with you, Jim.
The only thing I have is from Smart Transit. Had a meeting, we didn't have a meeting the month before, so we doubled up because we knew we were gonna have extra time to deal with the special audit. Because Smart Transit exceeded $750,000 in federal funding and therefore had to have a more detailed audit. And it passed with flying colors, so that was great. And things that are happening at Smart Transit, had a couple engine replacements that weren't really scheduled with some of the older buses, but increases the value of those if we decide to sell those off. So it should work out. Something else that's going on there is in the larger cities on your smartphone, you can click on the map and try to find out where you want to go and push the transit, tap on the transit, and it will tell you where the nearest public transit stop is and how to get to your destination. And Smart Transit is now set up that way in Moscow. So if you're at City Hall and you want to go to the transit center, you can type that into your phone and tap on the transit, and it will tell you when the bus comes and how long it takes you to get there. So I think that's a great addition. Daniel Gray, that's the executive director there, is making a video to show people how to do this, how to find their way around using Smart Transit in Moscow as things progress, and also that'll probably dovetail with the bike share, which also has been delayed. But again.
Oh, well, there you have it.
But anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, very good, Jim. Art?
Yeah, only one item was the Urban Renewal Agency meeting where we went through the report on the audit of the Association of Finance and had a report from Bill Belknap, very similar to what we just had here tonight. All the other meetings are coming up this next week.
Ann?
The only thing I have is from the Human Rights Commission. They're talking about hosting quite a few different events, but they haven't set dates for those. So they're talking about food drive, I think an arts fair of some sort, social justice forum. So as soon as I have more info, I'll definitely share that out.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ann. Brandy?
Planning and zoning had a reviewed proposed changes to the manufactured home parks, which I learned they're really technically not mobile home parks anymore. That changed in 1976, I think. They're no longer mobile homes. Any that are made after 1976 are manufactured homes now. Anyways, with different requirements for standards. And there was a really great, very interesting presentation that Michael Ray had prepared about subdivision net density review of many different neighborhoods in Moscow. So he showed, how many dwelling units per acre and how many people per acre, and it was very interesting to see the mix that we have, and that's all kind of leading into discussions about cluster developments, clusters, subdivisions, and what that would look like with that increased density. So that's all I have.
Gina?
I have nothing for you other than that I have a tree commission meeting tomorrow night and Parks and Rec on Thursday.
Okay, Catherine.
Sustainable Environment met and have been regularly meeting for about 3 hours. So, and they have about 20 to 30 people. We start at 7:15, which is amazing. But we had a presentation after the man, Bill Calderwater, presented at 1912. So he came to the SEC meeting and he did a presentation there on the smart meters. And then because of that presentation, I requested that Paul Kimmel come to present the other side of smart meter conversation. So if you're interested, he's being contacted to come to present at the May meeting on that issue. And then this next meeting in April, we're going to have Shelley Brock from the Citizens Allied for Integrity and Accountability on fracking in the South. And then they've been discussing the Earth Day Awards and the pesticides. The focus was on that. And lastly, we've had the nominations for environmental awards, and we have one of our nominees in the audience. And and then the other thing was, we did talk about the plastics, and so I've been giving an update on that, and I just want to let you all know that today, just at the door of the school, there was 34 pounds of plastic, and then somebody came over from Pullman and dropped off another 8 pounds. And just so, I thought about that for perspective today, and remember when I pulled the little box in, that means that person that came to Pullman just filled up a box. So we're getting a lot of plastic.
Yeah, what your total's like over?
Yeah, so we're over 1,000. We're 1,000. We're almost 1,100 pounds. Let's go there. So that's it. Yeah.
Good job, Catherine. Well, for folks, March 22nd, we had the last AIC Legislative Board meeting that we heard on, and holy smokes, and we didn't have one last Friday, but this seemed kind of like the last week. It was the too crowded thing with the initiative process and Prop 2. I don't know if anything else besides that got done. I'm not even sure really where the hell we're at with that, to be honest about it, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse my French, but just saying. Anyway, that's for another story some other time. March 25th was kind of fun because at Rotary, I did a luncheon meeting. Jen Piffner and myself were there, as well as Chief Fry, and we talked a little bit about the state of the city, but mostly about our bond initiative for the police department, and that was very well received. And I got to share what I asked, saved enough time for questions, and one of the people out in the audience said, Timmy said, well, the shift on the council has changed where the majority of council now are women, and, how are you dealing with that? I said, it's great, I made a comment about it's kind of an interesting thing, and I said, it's fun. We're having a good time getting a lot of stuff done, and one of the things I did tell him was that, when we went down to AIC, and I use this as an example, our city, we had 5 of our councilors there only because Jeannie had something else and couldn't be there. Yep. But we had the majority, as a percentage of our council of any city in the entire state, including Boise. And that's a big deal for us because, our town was represented very well by the elected officials. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing, and I still think it is. And then on March 27th, had an airport board meeting, talked about the usual things, and October 9th is the day for that runway to be done. So that's what Tony Bean, our executive director, said, and I said, okay, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, and so we'll see how it goes, but we're in big talks about this beginning stages of a new terminal as well, so we got a lot of things going on there, so that's interesting. And then March 27th, that evening, Gary Reeder, myself, Chief Fry was at the League of Women Voters talking about our bond initiative, and I thought it was very well received and went over a lot of good questions. Not necessarily a ton of people there, and Jen ran our slide presentation, but it turned out to be a very good meeting and lecture, talk, whatever you want to say. And we got a bunch of these, got a series of things going on where we're going to have coffee with a cop, and we got a
function going out at the Best Western one night, where we're gonna have an open house in the evening. We're gonna do one at the Chamber as well. These are upcoming events in the next 3 weeks, and a bunch of these different things, and hopefully I'll be meeting with the Lions Group as well coming up in the next couple of weeks. Gary, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you. Next Wednesday, Tuesday, April 9th, the Washington State is hosting the quarterly regional breakfast meeting. It is Grain to Glass. Colleen Kerr, I think, is I think she's a VP over there, will be presenting on that. So that is 7 a.m. at Banyans on the Ridge. If any of you would like to go, please get a hold of Kaylee. I want to recognize Kaylee. This is her shakedown cruise for Lori is sick today, so she got the news about 9 o'clock that we needed her to sit in tonight. So she's been cutting her teeth on committees, so it's great to have her here, and it's a good thing. As the mayor indicated, we presented to the League of Women Voters last Wednesday night. Very factual. Turnout wasn't as great as what we'd hoped, but great questions from the audience asking about the project. So that's great. There's also, if you look on the city's website, there's also good videos on there. We will be having tours through the building here. We just sat down today and finalized a tentative schedule for all of those things. So we're moving ahead. May 21st is the date, and we're steering toward that date. Also want to recognize that today, this afternoon, the second fire engine that we ordered from Bradenton Pierce in Bradenton, Florida, arrived. So we now have 2 new fire engines at fire station number 3, or it might be at the city shop today. But so we're moving ahead with that. So out of the 4 major fire apparatus that we have, since the council made it a priority in their strategic plan, 2 of those have been replaced within a period of less than 2 years. So it's amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it, and you're successful in getting a community development block grant. So good news, but we will be having a dedication for that, and certainly you'll all be invited, and the community will be invited to attend as well.
Fire engine 27, is that
Yes.
this one? Okay. Well, with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn, folks.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Close it at 9:15. Thank you, everyone.